This is John Howard, Interim Chair of the Public Service Commission. I call this session of the Public Service Commission to order. Secretary Phillips, have any changes to the final agenda?
There are no changes to the final agenda.
Thank you very much. But before we get started, I'd like to make a note of our arrangements for sessions today. In line with the guidelines concerning social distancing and minimizing large gatherings, and in light of executive orders that suspended the provisions of the Open Meetings Law on an emergency basis, we are conducting today's session remotely. I would like to remind those who are participating by phone to please mute their phone except when they are speaking. The public will have an opportunity to listen to the session on the department's webcast page, and we will also record and transcribe this session, as has been our practice. These arrangements have been reviewed by our general counsel and have found that these meet the requirements of the executive orders. Before I begin to our agenda, I would like to conduct a roll call of our commissioners. Please confirm that you're with us when I call your name. Commissioner Diane Berman.
Yes.
Commissioner James Alisi.
I'm with you.
Commissioner Tracy Edwards.
Yes. Good morning.
Great, thank you. With that, we will begin our regular agenda. First item for discussion is item 301, case 21-E0139, which is in the matter of the 2021 summer electric system preparations, presented by Jonathan Forward, Utility Engineer Specialist, and Paul Deramecto, Utility Supervisor. Tammy Mitchell, Director of the Office of Electricity, Gas, and Water, and Lekka Jonai, Chief Electric Safety and Reliability, will be available for questions. Jonathan, would you please begin?
Yes. Good morning, Chair Howard and Commissioners. My name is Jonathan Forward. I'm Utility Engineering Specialist 3 in the Electric Safety and Reliability section of the Office of Electric and Gas and Water. Today, we will be briefing you on the state's electric transmission and distribution system summer preparedness for 2021. Next slide, please. I will be conducting the briefing on the electric system preparedness and summer supply demand forecast. We can move on to the next slide. Each spring, staff conducts its annual review of the electric system and utility preparedness to meet the peak summer operating conditions for New York. This review focuses on electric system reliability and is part of our normal course of business at the department and is a high priority. Peak summer operating conditions are often when the electric system can be the most stressed, and we look to each of the utilities and to the NYISO for assurances that we are well prepared to meet New York customers' need for the upcoming season. This review consists of an assessment of the New York ISO projected demand forecast and the supply resource availability. Additionally, staff issues its annual summer preparedness survey to each of the utilities and reviews all responses, as well as conduct interviews with each utility to discuss planned and completed system reinforcements, spare equipment inventories, and confirm that they will reliably meet customer demands for the summer operating period. Through these surveys and interviews, we find that each of the utilities have completed or will complete all major planned reinforcements, inspections, and repairs prior to the start of the summer operating season and have adequate spare equipment on hand to meet unforeseen circumstances or system events. Based on staff's review and assessment of utility data, meetings with each of the individual utilities in the New York ISO, we find that the state's electric transmission and distribution systems are prepared to reliably meet forecast 2021 summer electric demands. Next slide, please. Here we will take a look at the forecast load compared with supply resources for the upcoming summer. This chart shows the historical actuals and forecast statewide peak demand as projected by the New York ISO. The lower brown colored line shows the 2020 peak load forecast over the next 10 years. This summer's peak load forecast is consistent with what we have seen over the past several years. The NYISO's baseline forecast projects a statewide peak demand for 2021 of 32,327 megawatts, very similar to last year's forecast peak of 32,296 megawatts. Looking out over the next 10 years, the peak load forecast remains practically flat. The flattening of the peak load growth rate can be attributed primarily to the positive effects of the state's energy programs and to underlying forecast econometric growth rates. It should be noted here that embedded in this demand forecast are any anticipated impacts of the ongoing COVID pandemic on electric energy usage throughout the state. Throughout 2020, the economic changes stemming from the COVID-19 pandemic caused measurable differences in 2020 demand levels and patterns compared to a typical year. Annual energy usage across the state was more than 4,100 gigawatt hours, or approximately 2.6% below the expected forecast developed early in 2020. As the year progressed, statewide peak demand steadily returned to near expected levels. The NYSO's most recent load shift update in response to the COVID-19 indicates that for the New York control area, overall energy usage was estimated between 1% and 2% below expected levels. The NYSO's forecast team has observed that this reduction in electric demand from commercial customers is the leading driver of overall reduced electricity consumption, while also observing an increase in residential energy usage, especially during the midday. Next slide, please. Corresponding to the previous graph, this chart shows the forecast impacts of the contribution of energy efficiency and distributed generation towards reducing peak demands. The blue bars represent forecast energy efficiency impacts, and the red bars represent impacts of distributed generation. By the year 2031, the combined effects of these programs is projected to help lower the peak demand by over 6,000 megawatts. Next slide, please. Here we present the expected available resource capability for 2021. Installed generating capacity for 21 totals 37,785 megawatts, a decrease of 690 megawatts from 2020. The decrease in generating capacity can primarily be attributed to the retirement of Indian Point Unit 3, net with the addition of the Cassadaga and Roaring Brook wind generating facilities. Combined, the installed generation capacity with projected demand response and special case resources, as well as net firm purchase imports, provides New York with a total of 41,066 megawatts worth of capacity resources for 2021. I'd like to touch here briefly on the recent retirement of Indian Point Unit 3 and its impact on this summer's electric operations. First and foremost, we find that the state will continue to have adequate energy supply and transmission capacity to reliably meet forecasted demand following the planned retirement of Indian Point. As you know, on April 30th of 2020, Entergy retired Indian Point Unit 2, and more recently on April 30th of 2021, Indian Point Unit 3 officially ceased operations, completing the planned retirement of the Buchanan nuclear facility. Retirement of Indian Point has long been planned for. Back in 2013, the Commission adopted the Indian Point Contingency Plan, which resulted in 600 megawatts of transmission upgrades and more than 100 megawatts of distributed generation added in the region. In 2017, following Entergy's formal submission of its generator deactivation notice, the NYSO issued a generator deactivation assessment, concluding that the system would be able to reliably meet reliability criteria without the Indian Point units under the assumed and forecasted system conditions. As noted earlier, we are also seeing notable reductions in energy consumption due in large part to the state's energy efficiency programs. By 2020, cumulative impacts of the state's energy efficiency initiatives since 2004 have reduced New York's energy statewide annual energy usage by over 26,000 gigawatt hours. Additional generation resources, including large-scale and distributed renewable resources, have also been added to the system that significantly offset lost generation from Indian Point. In the near term, in order to compensate for the retirement of the Indian Point units, it is expected that existing generation resources may be required to operate more, and there may be additional energy imports from our neighbors. While it is anticipated that the retirement of Indian Point 3 will lead to temporary changes in the state's generation resource mix, New York's climate policies ensure that the power sector remains below the 10-state RGGI region's carbon emissions cap, while New York continues to bring online new renewable energy and energy efficiency resources that are on track to exceed the statewide targets of 70% renewables by 2030 and zero emissions by 2040. Over the long term, as additional zero carbon resources and energy efficiency are put in place, we will see our emissions profile continue to decline. New York continues to see rapid growth in renewable energy build-out, comprised of nearly 100 large-scale solar and land-based wind and offshore wind projects awarded by the state that will add nearly 1,100 11,000 megawatts of clean power to the grid. Overall, we find that the electric system has adequate energy supply and transmission capacity to reliably meet forecast electricity demand following the planned retirement of the Indian Point units, and New York State's long-term renewable energy and emissions goals will not be jeopardized. Next slide, please. Each year, the New York State Reliability Council establishes an installed reserve margin, or IRM, identifying the amount of capacity that must be available above the forecast peak demand to ensure reliable system operations. The installed reserve margin is developed through an extensive study process which considers updated load analysis, resource availability, and transmission capability models, all which influence the level of capacity needed to maintain system reliability. The New York State Reliability Council has set the 2021-2022 installed reserve margin at 20.7% above the forecast peak demand. This 20.7% installed reserve margin results in a 6,692 megawatt minimum requirement above the forecast peak demand for a total installed capacity requirement of 39,019 megawatts. As mentioned previously, the total available capacity for 2021 is 41,066 megawatts, which is 2,047 megawatts above the minimum required. This equates to actual installed reserves of 27% above the forecast peak for 2021, providing further cushion to serve the peak load beyond the 20.7 margin required by the New York State Reliability Council. To further help curb peak energy system demands, each of the utilities have load relief programs in which customers are compensated for providing load reductions when called upon. Currently, there is an estimated 1,200 megawatts enrolled in these programs for 2021 to further facilitate peak demand reductions during the summer's hottest days. Additionally, the NYISO and each of the utilities have operating procedures in place to further mitigate any unforeseen reliability issues. These emergency operating procedures include emergency demand response programs, voltage reductions, voluntary industrial curtailments, energy purchases, among others. The NYISO projects over 3,000 megawatts of such emergency operating procedures to be available if needed this summer. This now concludes my portion of the presentation. Given all the information we have presented here, staff believes that the electric system is adequately prepared to reliably meet New York's customers' needs for the summer of 2021. I'll now turn it over to Paul to discuss projected summer pricing outlook.
Thank you, Jonathan. Good morning, Chair Howard. Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Paul D'Armecco, and I'm Utility Supervisor in the Office of Electric, Gas, and Water's Upstate Rates and Tariffs section. In this portion of the presentation, I'll be providing you with a summary of how the utilities have performed at reducing the electric supply price volatility for their full-service residential customers. I'll provide an overview of the utilities' residential electric supply portfolio composition for this summer, compare this summer's energy futures to last summer's futures and actuals, as well as discuss capacity price changes compared to last year, and finally provide a summary of how the market price changes are expected to impact full-service residential customers and compare the overall price change to the last several years. Next slide, please. This graph shows the results of the utilities' electric supply price volatility mitigation efforts since December of 2008. It compares the average New York ISO market price volatility, the red line, with the volatility of the utilities' residential electric supply portfolios, the blue line. When more simply stated, the lines show what the volatility of the utilities' portfolio would have been had they only purchased from the market versus what it actually is because they engage in hedging. Each point on the line represents the volatility over a 12-month period as measured by the coefficient of variation. As you can see from the chart, the utilities have continued to do a good job at reducing the portfolio price volatility compared to market. The highest point on the chart represents the volatility that was experienced as a result of the polar vortex in the winter of 2014. The following run-up in volatility and drop is a result of a combination of electric market prices steadily falling and the price spike that occurred in February 2015. This price spike was nowhere near as high as the prior winter, but it did cause the volatility to rise. We then experienced a few years of relatively stable prices due to mild weather, followed by another price spike that occurred in January of 2018, again, mainly driven by cold weather. The most recent run-up and subsequent decline in market price volatility as a result of energy prices declining, followed by an increase in the statewide full-service residential market price, which was primarily driven by a shift in capacity costs due to the New York ISO peaking on a weekend in the summer of 2019, which I discussed last summer, and a price spike that occurred in February of this last winter due to colder than normal weather. As you can see, the statewide portfolio continues to perform very well. Next slide, please. This chart shows the elements of the composite residential electric supply portfolio for this summer. As shown, about 58% of the portfolio consists of fixed price contracts. Of those fixed price contracts, the majority of them are financial in nature. The fixed portion of the portfolio also includes newer physical contracts, older legacy contracts, and a small amount of utility zone generation with fixed fuel costs, as well as NYPA contracts. The balance of the portfolio is predominantly made up of market purchases, followed by relatively small amounts of the utility's own generation with variable fuel costs, and index contracts that are primarily indexed to natural gas. Next slide, please. This chart shows this summer's expected average energy market prices based on ICE futures and how they compare to last summer's futures and actuals for New York City, Hudson Valley, and Western New York, or New York ISO zones J, G, and A respectively. Last summer's expected energy market prices that we reported to you last May are in green. Last summer's actual market prices are in blue, and this summer's expected market prices are in red. Last summer, the actual prices were relatively close to what was expected going into the summer period, considering how low prices were and the uncertainty surrounding COVID. At this point going into this summer, energy prices are expected to be higher than last year's actuals, which is expectation of a more normal summer, as well as higher generator fuel prices. With that said, I would like to note that the energy prices continue to be at historically low levels, even with the marked projected increase from last summer shown on the slide. I would also like to note that the actual prices will vary from futures due to weather, economic conditions, and demand on the system. Next slide, please. This slide shows what last year's summer strip auction capacity prices were and what this summer strip auction capacity prices are. As you can see, New York City is much lower than last year, whereas the rest of the state and G2J locality prices are higher than last summer. These changes are due to a combination of the following factors: an increase in the New York control area installed reserve margin from 118.9% to 120.7%, a change in New York City locational capacity requirements from 86.6% to 80.3%, and a change in the G through J locational capacity requirements from 90% to 87.6%. These changes are primarily driven by changes in the generation mix, including the retirement of Indian Point 3, which Jonathan previously discussed, as well as an increase in capacity capability into New York City due to certain operational changes. Next slide, please. We've added this slide this year to provide a bit of context around the changes in market prices. This chart shows the changes over the recent several years in the load-weighted, full-service, mass market residential customer commodity price. As you can see, although the price this summer is expected to be about 3% higher than last summer on a statewide average basis, it is in line with more recent several years and is much lower than where prices were in 2014. Depending on where customers are located in the state and what utility they're served by, their commodity prices may be higher or lower than last summer. At this point, it's expected that full-service residential customers in New York City will see a decrease in their commodity prices, where in most other parts of the state, they may experience increases compared to last summer. But again, they are expected to be well in line with recent prices. So to conclude, the utilities have continued to perform well at reducing the month-to-month price swings compared to market and have maintained approximately 58% fixed price hedge level for this summer on a statewide average basis, which will mitigate any unexpected price spikes should they occur. And although commodity prices are expected to be higher this summer, the state remains in a low-cost commodity environment, which is good news for customers. And that concludes my portion of the presentation, and we'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Again, I want to emphasize that this commission and the commission historically views reliability as its primary responsibility. This presentation should give New Yorkers confidence that our electrical system will be prepared for this summer, and the prices will remain largely stable. Again, as we move forward into our decarbonized environment, it will be, again, our role, our job, our absolute obligation to make sure reliability maintains at the highest standards possible. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Commissioner Berman for any comments.
Thank you so much. I echo your comments. I think it was very helpful analysis presented here. I would just like to ask for a briefing from staff perhaps next week as we look at what our contingency plans are for system reliability and any system interruptions that may occur, planned or unplanned, as well as highlighting for me some of the issues we are expecting that existing generation resources may be required to operate more, and then there be additional energy imports from our neighbors, as well as what the temporary changes to the state's generation resource mix will specifically look at and how we are addressing those issues, both short-term and long-term. Thank you.
Commissioner Lisi.
Thank you, Chairman. Once again, we see the results of the significant talent and effort that has gone into this report, and it gives us a sense of confidence that we'll have reliable and availability of energy going through the time period as noted. And thank you to the staff for a good job.
Thank you. Commissioner Edwards.
Yes, thank you. I want to echo my colleagues as well. It's a very comprehensive. I like the piece on Indian Point and how that is going to affect it. I appreciate the deep analysis that was done here, and I appreciate it. And I'll be voting in favor. Thank you.
Well, this is an informational session, so no votes
okay.
on this
All
one
right,
yet.
good. Even better. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner. Now, I'd like to go to our second item for discussion. It's item 501, case 20-C-0267, as it relates to the Frontier Action Plan. It'll be presented by Michael Rowley, Chief of Network Reliability. Deborah LaBelle, Director of Office of Telecommunications, and Brian Osius, Managing Attorney, will be available for questions. Mike, would you please begin? Mike?
Mike, you could be on mute.
Yeah, sorry about that. My device was on mute. So let me start again. Good morning, Chair Howard and Commissioners. The draft order before you approves the Frontier Action Plan, which was filed in compliance with the Commission's October 16th, 2020 order, approving the Frontier restructuring petition with conditions. In May of 2020, Frontier requested Commission approval of an internal restructuring plan contemplated under its Chapter 11 bankruptcy filing. As you recall, in two previous annual reports to the Commission, the Department raised concerns regarding the quality of service provided by certain Frontier subsidiaries. In particular, Frontier Telephone of Rochester, Citizens Telecommunications Company of New York, Frontier Communications of Osable Valley, and Frontier Communications of New York. In its petition for approval of its internal restructuring, Frontier asserted that its expected improved financial capacity following restructuring would allow it to focus on improvements to service quality. As such, in a supplemental filing to the petition, Frontier committed to invest an incremental $9 million in capital improvements in 24 central office entities or areas that had been identified by the company in consultation with staff as ones that warranted additional service quality enhancements. In approving the petition and supplemental filing, the Commission required Frontier to file within 90 days an action plan that address specific measures and projects to be completed by Frontier in the 24 central offices and how the $9 million in incremental capital expenditures over a 3-year period would enhance service quality and network reliability. On January 14, 2021, Frontier filed the Frontier Action Plan, which detailed the specific measures and projects to be completed by Frontier. The objectives of the action plan are to, 1, implement a focused program of capital investment and proactive maintenance aimed at reducing the number of troubles experienced by customers, and 2, improve customer trouble report rate and timeliness of repair performance metrics in the 24 identified central office entities. Turning to capital investments and proactive maintenance, Frontier includes a total estimate of more than $12.5 million in capital expenditures associated with the action plan projects. This is $3.5 million over the $9 million capital expenditures required by the order. Frontier's action plan includes 4 project category descriptions for intended capital expenditures. These include fiber investment, central office backup power enhancements, remote terminal power enhancements, and outside plant enhancements. With regard to fiber investment, Frontier plans to provide fiber to the premise network to approximately 8,000 additional locations as part of the action plan at a cost of approximately $6.4 million through 2023. This expansion is in addition to 30,000 locations being funded by the new New York broadband program and funding for 12,000 New York locations recently awarded to Frontier in the Federal Communications Commission's Rural Digital Opportunity Fund auction. The company says that fiber deployment will allow it to offer broadband services capable of download speeds as fast as 1 gigabits per second and move current services off its legacy copper network to improve telephone service quality. With regard to central office backup power, Frontier will replace batteries at various central offices to provide improved network resiliency and reliability during periods of commercial power loss. Frontier will spend approximately $1.36 million through 2023 to replace batteries in certain central offices. These investments will improve Frontier's preparedness and help maintain customer communication and access to emergency services during and after storm events and resulting commercial power outages, as seen in recent events like Tropical Storm Isaias. These investments are in addition to any potential conditions or requirements resulting from unresolved enforcement actions. With regard to remote terminals, Frontier identified over 190 projects that encompass upgrading remote switching equipment, installing batteries and generators, and copper to fiber migrations at remote terminals. The company notes that this is intended to reduce trouble tickets in these central offices and remote offices and improve service quality. The company claims these projects have an approximate cost of $3.3 million over the 3-year period of the action plan. As for outside plant, Frontier plans to use trouble ticket analysis and additional training to proactively look for and report outside plant facilities in need of repair or replacement. Frontier has identified approximately $1.37 million in cable repair projects. Together with Frontier's average annual capital expenditures, these incremental action plan investments result in a commitment by Frontier to spend a minimum of $83.24 million in capital investments in New York during 2020 and through 2023. With regard to metric performance, the action plan requires Frontier to meet or exceed metric targets and includes incentive provisions through the quarter ending June 30th, 2023. If either of or both of the action plan metric targets are not achieved in a given quarter, Frontier is obligated to file a remedial plan. The draft order also sets requirements for reporting so that effective monitoring and implementation and compliance is achieved. In conclusion, the proposed Frontier Action Plan meets the requirements of the Commission order issued on October 16th, 2020. It addresses much-needed service quality improvements and contributes to the expansion of fiber-based broadband in New York. Therefore, the draft order approves the Frontier Action Plan. That concludes my presentation, and the team would gladly answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mike. I really do appreciate the work that staff has done on the Frontier issues. Not a company that has been difficult for some time, and I do appreciate our vigilance. And during the COVID pandemic, we now know the incredible importance of a reliable telephone service. And the Commission will remain vigilant in maintaining reliability, not only in our electric system, but our telecom systems as well. And this also reminds us that we still have tens of thousands of legacy copper line customers, not only with Frontier, but across New York, and our continued need to upgrade technology as quickly as possible to fiber-based connections. Again, I thank the staff for this, and again, I believe we will have to remain very vigilant on this company in particular as we go forward, that they meet the performance standards as outlined in this order. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Commissioner Berman.
Thank you so much. I appreciated the hard work on this. I just wanted to flag the order does lay out the CWA's comments that they submitted in December 2020 on their concerns related to our October 2020 order approving the joint petition with conditions. And Frontier did respond to their specific concerns and explained their position. The order does recognize that Frontier is currently in the process of expanding fiber facilities in its New York network. And through these projects, the fiber expansion projects, Frontier does plan to deploy fiber to over 50,000 locations in New York, and is seeking to demonstrate that New York is in fact a core fiber investment state, and it will evaluate opportunities for further FTTP expansion. We stated we'll be looking at all of this as we go forward, and I appreciate staff's hard work and the companies as well as stakeholders in this action plan. Thank you.
Commissioner Alisi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Once again, we are seeing a plan where significant effort to improve service through upgrades to equipment and additional training meets the requirements of the Commission order of October 2020. Again, the staff has done a great job towards the benefit of consumers, and I appreciate the effort.
Thank you. Commissioner Edwards.
Yes, thank you. I agree with Chair Howard in terms of really paying particular attention to this company, especially with storm restorals and meeting the obligations to their employees. So I appreciate the thoroughness and thank you for this update.
I'll now call for a vote. My vote is in favor of the recommendation to approve the Frontier Action Plan as outlined. Commissioner Berman, how do you vote?
Yes.
Commissioner Alisi, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Edwards, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Thank you. This item is approved and the recommendations are adopted. Now move to the consent agenda. Do any of the commissioners wish to comment or recuse themselves from voting on any items in the consent agenda? Beginning with Commissioner Berman.
Thank you. I have several items I'll be commenting on. First, in bulk 265 through 268. I will be concurring consistent with my past voting record. I have no further comments on that. On item 370, I did want to comment. I will be voting in favor of this, but I think it deserves an explanation of why. Here, the commission, if approved, is issuing a stay of a limited portion of our prior order that addressed the public policy transmission need for delivering offshore wind off of Long Island. And so a little background, March 19, 2021, our commission issued this order addressing the public policy requirements for transmission planning purposes. That March 2021 order prescribed, among other things, a cost allocation methodology to be applied by the New York ISO using a beneficiaries pay principle that assigns essentially 75% of the project cost to those beneficiaries receiving economic benefits associated with congestion relief, and the remaining 25% portions of the costs are allocated statewide on a load ratio share. After that order, we received two separate motions for petitions for rehearing. One was filed by the Long Island Power Authority and the other by Consolidated Edison and Orange and Rockland Utilities. In those petitions for rehearing, they were addressing the substantive issues, but also requested a limited stay of the aspects of the March 2021 order that relates to the cost allocation methodology. We also received, so far, and more comments may come in, but we also received comments in response to those petitions for rehearing from a number of folks that were addressed on the substantive issue of whether to grant or deny the petitions for rehearing. It's important for folks to understand that under the New York ISO open access transmission tariff, it does require the ISO to file with FERC a cost allocation methodology prescribed by the commission for public policy transmission need within 60 days of issuance of a commission order. So understanding that filing would happen, it actually might, if we did not stay this order, it might effectively render moot, their arguments for petition for rehearing due to the New York ISO filing. It makes sense to me from a procedural perspective and procedural concerns that if we fail to grant this limited stay, we will essentially be making moot their opportunity for petition to be heard. But I do want to say, and I appreciate that the draft order actually does take explicit note that we, by issuing this stay, we're not addressing here the substance of the petitions. That will be done, and any comments that have been received and will be received will be considered in due time. However, we are not seeking to delay or influence the outcome of the ISO process, including the solicitation of transmission needs and the ISO's potential selection of a solution. And I think it's just important for us to say that. So I wanted to make that clear why I vote for that. For item 373, I will be concurring, but I am going to flag some concerns I have. In here, this is the matter of value of DER petition, the generic one, but we're adopting the recommendations in the staff white paper with modification that standardize and clarify certain banking rules for community DG projects. I do have to take note that this order does apply to the CGG aspects of a CCA. Historically, I've been very publicly concerned about both CDG and CCA and the applicability or not of CDG within the CCA, and for us needing to be very careful in what we're doing and taking a careful look I appreciate that this order seeks to clarify the banking rules, but CDG in and of itself has been very clunky and confusing throughout our process. At this time, it's important to note that the Commission has only approved an opt-out CDG as an additional project offer of a CCA program for Joule assets. The Commission has not yet weighed in on whether CCA programs may offer opt-out CDG only, or whether the current approach should be available for all CCA administrations. I also note that we have received numerous petitions requesting authorization to administer opt-out CDG only programs under the CCA framework. We've received requests from current CCA administrators to add opt-out CDG to their existing programs. And most recently, a declaratory ruling request from Joule seeking to move forward with opt-out CDG in Long Island. It's really important for us that the Commission as a body carefully weighs in on all of these issues, even to the extent that the factors of what's happening with ESCOs and CCAs and CDG online. It's really important for us as a body to fully understand the ramifications statewide and to be engaging in clear guidance on short and long term what some of these issues may be and how it would apply or wouldn't apply, and make sure that we are carefully evaluating the current success and failure of CCAs and CDG itself. So I just weigh that on item. The next item, 377. This is an order that is addressing the continuation or not of standby rate exemptions. The order supports essentially three tracks for the existing standby rate exemptions. One, the Commission should continue exemptions related to Public Service Law 66-J and 66-L indefinitely. The Commission should continue exemptions related to renewable energy and energy storage technologies for another 2 years. And 3, the Commission should not, and I underscore that because that is part of my concern and why I'm voting in part no, should not renew the exemptions related to combined heat and power, CHP. My concern here is that I feel very strongly that the failure to extend the CHP exemption, like the other exemptions that are getting extended, while we await resolution on the standby rate policy matters in the VETR proceedings, it makes no sense to me that we would grant this exemption again for the other exemptions. We extend it, and yet not for CHP. I feel it's under some misguided reliance on the fact that we can't do that under state energy policy and CLCPA law, so we're not going to grant the exemption extension for CHP. I feel that there is a great opportunity for us to make sure that we are consistent with the 2019 Commission order that granted the exemption extension for all existing exemptions and said that we would look at this in an ongoing collaborative and the standby rate proceedings. Traditionally, for me, when we have Commission precedent, if we're going to change our rationale and what we're doing, we need to really carefully lay out the reasons for that looking into the record on what makes sense to do it. And if there's nothing in the record that would support or changing that Commission precedent, I don't think it's helpful to just cite to some oversimplification and erroneous reliability on the state energy policy and CLCPA as a reason to change the Commission precedent. I think it's fundamentally flawed. And as I look at this, I do believe that we are actually discriminating against the CHP exemption extension by denying it versus the others. It's totally, if we did grant this extension for the limited duration while what we're doing in the standby rate proceedings, we would be totally consistent in our actions with not only the other exemption extensions, but consistent with the 2019 order. And most importantly, would allow us to address this issue more thoughtfully and perhaps with collaboration in the other pending proceedings. Moreover, overwhelmingly, the commenters asked for this, stating the real need to be extending the exemption as we did in 2019, that would ensure that the need for these exemptions will be investigated again collaboratively. And it's important for us to make sure that we were doing that. As I read the 2019 order, it struck me very much that we did at that time look at the arguments that were raised by the joint utilities primarily on why the exemption should not continue. And we very carefully explained why we were going to continue those exemptions and extend it. And we have not yet resolved the very issues that we said we were going to get to. And we are extending the exemptions for others on the same basis as that. And yet, for some reason, saying no to the CHP exemption purely on an oversimplification of reliance on the CLCPA, which I believe, frankly, is a erroneous reliance. We also did not address any of the specific substantive issues that talked about the benefits of CHP. We left that unaddressed. And yet, at the same time, the other issues for why the exemption substantively should continue will be addressed in the more fuller record, which is where I think it should be. Just to clarify also, I think this may actually take us backwards if we eliminate this exemption inappropriately without carefully looking at it in the other proceeding. As some of the commenters have said, CHP and all electric fuel cell systems offer substantial benefits that include, and I'm going to list out the 7 that I see. 1, reducing and eliminating greenhouse gas emissions, criteria pollutants, and reducing water consumptions. 2, creating resilient power that can operate independent of the grid. 3, energy density and sitting in space constrained areas that cannot accommodate other clean alternatives. 4, power generation close to loads, avoiding or reducing line losses and congestion costs. 5, increased energy efficiency. 6, providing 24/7 load following power behind the meter and at utility scale. And 7, the ability to operate on renewable gas, hydrogen, and natural gas. For me, it is very clear that those benefits that are being shared is for us to examine that and say, and for us to then just say, well, we can't do this exemption extension because it would not be consistent with the CLCPA and the state energy policy. Doesn't make sense, since all of those potential benefits alleged actually would be supportive of our decarbonization policies. And I think we're handicapping ourselves as we go forward if we are limiting it so narrowly. In fact, I think that it's true that if we do not take a careful look at this, we may actually not be able to meet our ambitious energy and environmental objectives if we continue to handicap ourselves. So I'm going to be voting in favor of the exemptions being extended. However, I will be voting no on the one that is failing to extend the CHP exemption because I do not think it's supported in the record, as well as thinking that it is discriminating without rationale. It's sufficient on why we're not doing that one, but doing the others. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Alisi.
I have no comments on the consent agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Edwards.
No, I have no comments. Thank you.
I now move for a vote on the consent agenda. I will be voting in favor of the consent agenda in its entirety. Commissioner Berman.
I'm voting yes, except for the ones that I laid out.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Alisi
I'm voting yes.
and Commissioner Edwards.
Yes, thank you.
Great. With that being said, Secretary Phillips, is there anything further to come before us today?
There is nothing further to come before you, but I just want to clarify the last vote on the consent agenda with respect to Commissioner Berman. I have indicated that on items 265 through 268, you are concurring. On 370, you are in favor. And on 373, you are concurring in part and dissenting in part. Can you confirm?
So I think the numbers are wrong. So in 260, let me just repeat so I make sure that we're all on the same page. I'm not going to repeat my comments, just my vote. So 265 to 268, I'm concurring. 370, I'm voting yes. 373, I am concurring. 377, I vote in favor in part, and I vote in denial in part. I vote no in part.
Okay, so I have
73 is a concurrence. 377 is yes in part, no in part.
okay, thank you.
With that, I will adjourn this meeting of the commission. And thank you and commissioners and staff for your hard work today. Thank you very much.